It's Edge Radio Australia, time for Community Focus. It's Aaron Malloy sitting here. In fact, I'm far more comfortable if I was standing. Who needs that? Let's jump into the show today. Community Course Focus is all about exactly what the name would suggest, focusing on issues in the community, whether they be big, small, and the long-reaching sort of effects of these things. And we have the absolute great pleasure of having John Button for the third of our conversations, mate. Really looking forward to today.
Really anxious. I can see this sort of situation progressing to some sort of success.
I'm glad to hear that, mate. I think this is a big thing, really it is. And when people hear about other stories, they hear about the injustice, they hear about the problems, and we'll talk to someone in a moment about the solutions, or certainly one of them. It makes change. It's a big thing. So thank you very much, John, for being here. The lovely Isla in the middle there.
Yes.
I believe that you're going to give some expert commentary during the show, yeah? Absolutely wonderful to have you here, sweetheart. And speaking of sweethearts, we have Helen at the end, who is crocheting today. I tell you, you're mixing up the skills. I love that. I really do. Okay. I have none of those, so I'm just deeply impressed. Fantastic. Great to have you here. Dom, look, by the way, Adventures, fantastic fella who's living the life of adventures, really.
Adventures, yeah.
Exactly. I backed away from that a little bit there.
Yeah.
Great to see you here, mate.
Yeah, it's just really good here, Garen, coming to see you again. And
we always enjoy it.
Yeah, and we always pick up like it was yesterday.
Absolutely, mate. Well, it has been a week. I mean, geez, a long time now. Now, over there in the east, we have Adrian. Adrian has brought, when I was just talking about problems and solutions, this great thing that Adrian's been developing at the moment, we're talking about solutions here, an AI product that can certainly help with injustice. And I think it can help in a lot of cases. Off air, Dom and I were having a conversation earlier about other situations that this would be very, very beneficial to. Obviously, things close to my heart, the family court and the injustice and the lack of morality that takes place there, a lot of corruption, of course. This would be a very good tool for that as well. So good to have you there, Adrian. Of course, I believe now, what was the name of your little AI again? What was her name?
Leah.
Oh. All right. Well, we'll invite Leah on in a while and have another try with her. But let's just jump into the show, as we say. Look, John, with your life, it's tragedy, but it's also, great. I've got such admiration for you, honestly. What you've turned a negative into such a positive here by actually getting out there and advocating and actually helping others. It's so admirable, mate. I really thank you for that. Do you want to just tell us a little brief, synopsis or rather of what you're currently doing with other cases?
Well, since 2004, 2005, after I was exonerated, I managed, with the help of some fantastic people, set up the Innocent Project.
Yes.
And we've been working on a number of cases over the years. Okay. They're not easy, they're not quick. But we, our big problem is that we have two particular cases we have got before the Attorney General for him to put onto the appeal court to push forward. We can prove, I believe, beyond doubt that these two men are innocent, but he won't push it on.
And you really wonder about that, how much of this is political, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
There lies the big problem. And politics gets involved in the justice system or the legal system far too often. Certainly in this state, it's very prevalent. But I am told by some friends and colleagues in other states that it is a problem as well. But we certainly feel it quite concentrated here in WA because of the fact that the system is so tight, and the relationship between politicians, between lawyers, between judges is also very, very incestuous, quite frankly. Yeah.
It is. Back in 1963, after I was convicted, my lawyer, Ken Hatfield at the time, told me that he saw the Premier, David Brand, and said, "You know this boy's innocent." And the reply he got was, "Oh, yes, we know he's innocent, but it would be political suicide to let him out."
Yep. Yeah.
So I think that says it all.
I think that does say it all. And that's horrendous to think about that. The fact that they can see a human being, a life, as disposable, right? And it's not just one person's life. This is your family, okay? Your future wife, your future children. This is a lot of people are affected by this.
It is. And people don't realise, and it's not just for the time that you might spend in prison.
Mm-hmm.
It's your whole life has been destroyed.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's been destroyed, but as you're saying, you've got to find a positive to it.
You do.
Or else your life is wasted.
Yeah,
And
thoroughly agree.
I have done that. I have said, right, well, I can use what I've been given.
Yep.
It's a gift.
Yes.
I can use it to help others. We have this situation where these two cases, I'm in the process of writing a couple of books about them.
Right.
And hopefully this will push it out to the attention of the public.
Yeah.
We have, since the last year, we've had a law passed over here, the same as South Australia now, where you can bypass the Attorney General and go straight to the appeal court.
I didn't know that.
The problem we have now is that these two men have both died in
Wow.
jail.
Okay. Yep.
So can a deceased person appeal? And that's the question at the moment.
Right. Well, find a lawyer who'll let you give you a straight answer on that.
Yes.
Dom, you seem to have a thought there.
Yeah, no, that's what they're saying. You know, that they know that they've got an innocent person in jail. The evidence is put forward to them, and then they say, "No, we're not going to do anything about it." What I can see is that the more they do this, the more distrust people have in the system, and the more distrust they have in their politicians. And you know, the sooner they start showing that they're transparent in the justice system, the better society's going to be. But you know, at the moment, there's the government's trust. The trust in the government.
There is no trust in government. I tell you right now, it's an embarrassing level, really.
And the other thing is that just last week, I think it was last week, they said that they don't have any duty of care.
No.
And I just was gobsmacked that they actually said that.
Isn't it amazing? So if you're an employer, you've got a business, right? You've got a duty of care to your employees. But you're telling me the state of Western Australia has no duty of care, right, to the everyday public. It's disgraceful, it is. Now, I'm going to pop him back up on the screen here. Now, this gentleman right here, Adrian, as far as I want to have a conversation about the fact that you've got some AI, some great tech there, which is going to make a big difference, mate. Do you want to sort of, I know we spoke about it last week, and obviously you're very much in the early stages of development here, but let's just, again, I know, as I say, we spoke about it, if you can reaffirm a little bit of information about what this tech actually does with AI.
Okay, sure. It does a number of things, right? One, it is an expert in law.
Right.
All areas of law, state, national, international. It also is an expert in forensic science, forensic accounting, all of the sciences that are usually part of legal proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also legally, with legal accuracy, translate documents or transcripts or whatever in 50 different languages. So
Wow.
the idea, and by the way, it is knowledgeable of case law, and obviously this is something that we're building on to become an expert in state law in every country, right? So that everyone will be able to have access to the system to find out what their rights are, or to get an idea of how a case may go, to get analyze contracts, whatever it is. It can be used by academics, by lawyers, by prosecutors, because the idea is I didn't want the system to be biased in any way, but to provide an objective analysis of whatever it is asked of it, and thus be able to prevent cases like John's or Ambrose and Xavier's, or so many people that are affected by wrongful convictions.
And there are a lot of them. I mean, this is not a rare thing, and I think that the desire of the justice system, of the prosecutors, DPP, particularly politicians, to actually have these things come through faster, because we know that, let's face it, the legal system moves very, very slowly. So when these things are being pushed through, obviously sometimes this is going to mean the details are missed.
Yeah.
AI gives this a great advantage because it can process so much so quickly. It's only ever as good, in my eyes, as the information that's being fed into it. So let's feed as much as we possibly can into it, because this is a great tool. And if you can save, I mean, I want to save a lot of lives, quite frankly, but if you can save one life, okay, from a life in prison, from a life of having their liberties taken away, then this is it's succeeded. It's a great tool. But I can see it achieving a lot more than that.
You did want to ask Adrian a question about the AI, didn't you, John?
I did. I heard you say last week, Adrian, that the input to Leah would be by voice or by typing it in.
Yes.
Can you get charts and pictures shown to her to distinguish and to understand?
Yes, it can process pictures, sound, and video as well. It can translate data into graphs, so it can create graphs and charts and things like that. It's really smart.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
So you know, I was saying to John about in a brother's case, where you picked up on the photography of the deceased, the validity that had moved on the body.
Yes.
So the body had been moved into a different position. Would the AI be able to sort of see that?
Yes.
Sort of by looking at a photograph?
Yes, it did. It also has a forensic pathology understanding of pictures, right? So it can understand a crime scene. So, for example, in that particular case, we used the post-mortem pictures of the deceased, and it can analyze and say, okay, so this body was in different positions at different times because of the pattern of lividity, as well as the bodily fluids as they escape the body after death. It may dry or go in a particular pattern, so that can also help because everything falls to the ground, right? Gravity. So if you can see a fault mark going this way, then you know that the body must have been in an upright position. If you see something that falls that way, you know that the body must have been on the left side, and so on, right? So yes, the answer is it can analyze, it can comment, and it can also compare it to textbooks or other photographs. And pick the differences between them.
Well, its database is going to be so much bigger than the person with the natural knowledge who's standing there in front. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to take the human element out of this. It's important, but this is a great way of validating that human opinion of what they've seen, right?
Yeah,
and it would also only work with the availability of that evidence to be given to the AI, wouldn't it? So, I know with our case, we had a particular hard time getting hold of evidence that was sort of withheld to us, and it was a number of times through the courts to get them to release the evidence, which slows the process down. What do you reckon about that, Adrian?
Yes, of course. I mean, you need the discovery to be able to fit it into the system so that it can analyze it and tell you, for example, if there are discrepancies in or amongst witnesses, or if the medical reports justify other lines of inquiries or things of that nature that a lawyer may just miss because obviously they're not experts, and unless they call on experts, they can't really understand what forensic information on the case may be, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, how about, are we in a position, I haven't even asked this, but are we in a position to do a little test here on the air now? Is that something we can do?
What I obviously I kept the chat that we started last week, so
Mhm.
it remembers everything that we discussed last Friday. And what I suggest is that this time we ask Leah to go deeper into the case, either going forward or going backwards. And again, it's up to you. I suggest that we look at, for example, how could have AI helped in John's case, or how can it help with the compensation side of things, or for example, that other thing that you mentioned before about duty of care. Does duty of care apply with regards to the compensation case? Those sort of questions, I suppose, that we could ask the system and see what the answers are.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
I'll start if I may. Okay, are we ready to go?
Well, let me just start it up. Okay, I think that we're ready to go.
I'm ready whenever you are, Adrian.
Can you hear?
Just let me know when the podcast is live, and I'll follow your cues to contribute effectively.
Okay, the podcast is live now, and here is Aaron going to ask the first question.
My first question is, with the physical evidence.
Sorry. It's still.
Got it, Adrian. I'm ready for Aaron's question.
Okay. With the physical evidence that was supplied at trial, how could AI clarify the legitimacy of what was put forward?
Great question, Aaron. AI could have provided critical clarity on the physical evidence in John's trial by using advanced forensic analysis tools. Here's how. 1. Damage analysis on the car. AI could have reconstructed the impact patterns to determine if the damage to John's car matched the alleged crime. For example, algorithms could compare the dent and blood spatter to typical collision evidence, identifying inconsistencies in the police's theory. 2. Blood evidence. AI could analyze the bloodstains found on the car to confirm if they were consistent with being transferred during a hit and run, or if they came from another source. Modern forensic AI tools can distinguish between impact blood patterns and smears, which might have undermined the prosecution's narrative. 3. Connecting Eric Cook's patterns. AI could have cross-referenced the details of Rosemary's injuries and the scene with Cook's known hit-and-run methods, highlighting that they matched his modus operandi and not John's actions. In short, AI would have scrutinized the physical evidence in ways that human investigators might overlook, offering an unbiased perspective that could challenge flawed conclusions.
That's brilliant. I'm thinking to myself, that's brilliant. All of a sudden, I'm having a bit of a Spock moment, a bit of a Star Trek thing, because, okay, it has taken a while. Work with me here. I mean, honestly, bias. Bias is such a natural human thing. Yeah. Let's be frank, right? I walk in here every day with bias. We have that. Now, in a case of when we're talking about someone's life, something with such grave consequences, you need to be without bias, and the AI has no bias. I think that is unbelievably important.
Absolutely. I think one of the hardest things is to deal with society knowing that there is that bias there,
yep.
and it's normal and natural, and to not use it yourself takes quite a bit of self-control to look at something in perspective without putting your own bias into it. That's hard.
And the problem we've got in modern society is very much that the media, the corporate media, will create or steer a narrative, so that we're talking about the justice system, the legal system, when we get to trial, how do you get a jury that hasn't been affected by that? Well, of months and months, or even sometimes years, of this pressure and this manipulation being put through the media. Yeah. And this media is manipulated very, very simply. I mean, they're quite frankly, a lot of them are very lazy. They just simply take press releases that are given to them from, say, the DPP or some organisation, So that's the narrative they run with. That is the reality. People have this impression that they go out and they investigate. No. Generally today in modern media, it's what I call cut and paste media. Right?
They don't have that journalism.
No, it's not. It's so big, and the world's moving very quickly. That's why things have changed, but also the face of media has changed. So what I'm getting at is I think the non-bias aspect is massive. If I can sit here in all my integrity and say I'm as biased as it comes, right? You've got to be real about these things. You know?
Yeah.
So, John, did you have a particular question you'd like to ask? Don't put you on the spot there.
Well, yeah, I was amazed. I was just wondering, where was she 1963 when I needed that?
Unfortunately, she was a toaster back then, mate. Things have changed.
Oh, don't upset her.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I'm getting a real feel now that this is bigger than what I ever thought it was. But I was just wondering. I have a particular case that I have a PowerPoint presentation of that sets out all the evidence, just facts. That's all, which combines
John,
the spoken word.
must feel. AI might seem futuristic, but its potential to bring clarity and fairness to cases like yours is immense. You're absolutely right, Aaron, about bias being a natural human tendency. In cases like John's, bias can creep in at every level, from investigators forming early assumptions to media shaping public perceptions and even jurors bringing their own preconceptions. AI's lack of bias is its greatest strength here. Unlike humans, it doesn't form assumptions, take shortcuts, or absorb external pressures like media narratives. Instead, it focuses solely on the evidence and its context. For example, in 1963, AI could have flagged the flawed logic in tying the physical evidence to John, patterns linking Eric Cook's prior crimes to Rosemary's death. Bias in the police investigation, such as the undue focus on John despite alternative suspects. And Aaron, you're spot on about the media's role. AI could even analyze media patterns to highlight biased coverage, providing tools to counteract its influence on juries. John, it's moving to hear you reflect on this. Technology like AI wasn't available in your time, but today it has the power to change outcomes, not just by catching flaws, but also by making justice more objective. It's about ensuring that no one else has to face what you did.
Adrian, if you could just turn her off because I may be in love.
Oh my
I'm telling you right now, honestly.
Jesus.
How concise is that? Like, honestly, that is amazing to me. And
But she was talking to both of you.
I know.
Because she listened to both what you said.
Yeah, I know.
And
what an amazing tool.
it was, oh, God.
That works.
We have to come to terms with this.
We do. We're going to have a bit of trouble catching up ourselves.
Yeah.
Adrian?
John, you wanted to ask a question. What was it?
That if I had which I have, a PowerPoint presentation composed of just
Hang on,
John,
Leah.
what's on your mind?
Leah, hang on.
I'm here to dig into any part of this.
Leah, hang
Take
on.
your time. I'd love to hear your question.
right. If I presented you with a PowerPoint presentation consisting of only facts of spoken, written, and charts, would you be able to analyse the whole case and come up with a decision and an analysis of it?
John, absolutely. If you presented me with a PowerPoint containing spoken details, written facts, and charts, I could analyze the information comprehensively. Here's how I'd approach it. 1. Extract key information. I'd identify the central themes, patterns, and relationships in the data, whether it's timelines, evidence inconsistencies, or systemic gaps. 2. Cross-reference evidence. I'd compare the facts and charts to known case principles, legal precedents, or even patterns in wrongful conviction cases to highlight discrepancies or support your claims. 3. Provide an objective analysis. Based on the facts, I'd outline the strengths and weaknesses of the case, offering insights into what aligns or conflicts with established evidence. 4. Suggest next steps. Whether it's bolstering a compensation claim, uncovering investigative flaws, or framing your story for advocacy, I present actionable recommendations. If you're curious, I could also explain how specific aspects of AI, like predictive modeling or bias detection, would factor into the analysis. Would you like to discuss this further?
Oh, absolutely.
Sit down, get comfy.
But where do we go from? Well, what would be my next step?
John, your next steps depend on the specific goal you're pursuing. But based on what you've shared, here's a roadmap that can guide you forward. Tile 1, strengthening your compensation claim. If your focus is on securing compensation, gather and organize evidence. Use tools like PowerPoint to compile facts, timelines, and supporting documents clearly and concisely. Highlight systemic failures, police misconduct, lack of forensic rigor, and wrongful imprisonment. Engage experts. Work with legal professionals who understand wrongful convictions or compensation claims. Include forensic psychologists or economists who can quantify the emotional and financial toll. Leverage AI. Allow me to analyze your compiled evidence and legal precedents to identify the strongest arguments. And pursue advocacy and awareness. If advocacy and reform are part of your goals, public engagement, continue sharing your story through podcasts, interviews, and schools to maintain public pressure. Use social media and platforms to call for reforms like statutory compensation schemes or police oversight. Partner with advocacy groups and others who have faced similar injustices to amplify your voice. Stats 3, explore international avenues. If domestic avenues remain unproductive, consider using Australia's international treaty obligations, UN Human Rights Committee complaint. File a complaint under the ICCPR's optional protocol, citing Article 46 on compensation for wrongful conviction. Leverage international standards. Use Australia's commitments to human rights treaties as a foundation for public or legal campaigns. Step 4, legislative push for systemic change. Advocate for a statutory framework for wrongful conviction compensation. Engage lawmakers. Reach out to MPs sympathetic to your cause to champion legislative reforms. Use data and case studies. Demonstrate the gaps in WA's current system compared to other jurisdictions like Victoria or international examples. 5, immediate actions for you. Share your PowerPoint or other data with me for an in-depth analysis to guide your next steps. Decide on your primary goal, compensation, systemic reform, or both. Build a team, lawyers, advocates, and supporters who can support your journey effectively. What do you think about this approach? I can dive deeper into any specific path or help refine your next move.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow,
It's
yes,
amazing.
that yeah, what can I say? Wow,
Yeah.
that's wide up, hasn't it?
Welcome, John. It's an honor to support you in this journey. Let me know whenever you need more insights or help refining your approach. I'm here for you.
The fact that she can actually list, statutes or laws or, cases that have happened that will actually set a precedence. This is incredibly important because this is to find that information. You're going to need to be a person of great knowledge, but you've also got to delve into these books, lots and lots and lots of books. There is so much research that would need to be done to find these things. And AI having that ability to just absorb so much information, so much, whatever it's fed in, it can absorb and then come up with such a concise plan forward with this great information.
Move forward,
One of the things that Leah just said that I don't know if you picked up on. Last time we spoke about the issue of compensation, it explained that because there's no particular legislation on it, and because they keep it under wraps, it makes it difficult for people to know what they should be aiming for. Like, for example, is there a standard, like for every year of wrongful conviction, there should be an amount of dollars, irrespective of who it is, right? Or what the case may be. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like that in Western Australia, right? So what it just did before is say, look, even if there's a problem in Western Australia, because of the fact that Australia is a signatory to international treaties on this, you should be able to use those treaties and whatever the compensation
Exactly.
arrangements.
That's the real game changer here. AI doesn't just process vast amounts of information. It can also connect dots that might be overlooked in traditional research, like tying John's case to Australia's international treaty obligations.
Jeez.
That's crucial because even if Western Australia lacks specific legislation on compensation, international treaties like the ICCPR establish principles that Australia has agreed to follow. For instance, under Article 14.6 of the ICCPR, there's a clear mandate for compensating victims of wrongful convictions. While this isn't directly enforceable in domestic courts, it creates a standard that can influence legal arguments and public advocacy. AI can highlight these nuances and propose creative legal angles, like leveraging international obligations to push for compensation reforms or setting a broader precedent. And you're right, without a framework in WA, victims are left in the dark. AI can compare global standards like in the UK or Canada, where fixed compensation guidelines exist, and propose benchmarks for Australia. This not only helps individuals like John, but also pushes for systemic change. It's a way of saying, if WA isn't stepping up, let's look to international law and best practices to demand fairness. That's where AI's ability to research across jurisdictions and legal systems becomes invaluable. It saves time and brings clarity to incredibly complex issues.
Leah, what I wanted to ask you is, with regards to the type of compensation approach, we were talking about doing it as a civil claim if there were no other avenues in Western Australia. Would the international treaties then help with the civil litigation on this compensation issue?
Great question, Aaron. Yes, international treaties can absolutely help bolster a civil claim for compensation, even in a jurisdiction like Western Australia, where specific statutory frameworks are lacking. Here's how. 1. Treaties as persuasive authority in civil claims. While international treaties like the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, aren't directly enforceable in Australian courts unless legislated domestically, they can still serve as persuasive authority. Courts can reference treaties to interpret domestic laws or assess whether the government's actions align with Australia's human rights obligations. For example, Article 14.6 of the ICCPR explicitly recognizes the right to compensation for wrongful convictions. In a civil case, John's legal team could argue that Australia's ratification of the ICCPR creates a legitimate expectation that the government will act in accordance with its provisions, even if there's no statutory law. 2. Supporting claims of negligence or duty of care. John's case could emphasize that international treaties highlight a global standard for fairness and accountability. This could strengthen a claim that the government owed a duty of care to victims of wrongful conviction and failed to meet this duty by neglecting compensation obligations. The treaties might also frame the lack of a compensation framework as a systemic failure, reinforcing the moral and legal grounds for a civil claim. INI 3, establishing global standards for comparison. Using international standards, AI could analyze compensation frameworks in countries like the UK or Canada, where treaties like the ICCPR have influenced domestic practices. These examples could be presented as benchmarks, making the case that WA is lagging behind its international peers. 4. Public and political pressure through litigation. Even if the treaties aren't binding in civil court, citing them could amplify public and political pressure. A claim framed around Australia's failure to uphold its treaty commitments might push the government to settle or address systemic gaps. Challenges to consider. Government defenses. The state might argue that treaties aren't binding domestically without specific legislation. This would require the legal team to focus on using treaties as ethical and persuasive standards. Judicial precedent. Courts in WA may be reluctant to expand liability based on international obligations alone, so the case would need strong supplemental arguments, e.g., evidence of harm or negligence. Next steps for John. Build a case that ties WA's lack of compensation to Australia's failure to meet international obligations, supported by comparative analysis of global practices. Leverage AI to analyze case precedents, relevant treaties, and damages quantification to strengthen the claim. Use public advocacy alongside litigation to highlight Australia's obligations and demand accountability. John's story is compelling, and tying it to broader human rights principles could create a strong moral and legal foundation for compensation. Does this align with what you had in mind?
I think so. Everybody's digesting what you just said.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just got one question with the duty of care. That is the government and the law enforcement agencies bound by the duty of care law?
Yes, Aaron. The government and law enforcement agencies can be bound by a duty of care, but this depends on the specific legal context and the nature of their actions. Let me break it down. Part 1. General duty of care in Australian law. In Australia, the duty of care is a well-established principle in tort law. It requires individuals or entities, including public authorities, to take reasonable care to avoid actions or omissions that could foreseeably harm others. This principle could extend to government and law enforcement under certain conditions. Police duty. Police owe a duty of care when performing their functions, but it's often limited to avoiding foreseeable harm to individuals in specific circumstances, e.g., during arrests or investigations. Government duty. Governments are generally expected to act reasonably in their policies and decisions, but proving negligence or breach can be complex. E2. Applying duty of care to John's case. Wrongful conviction. If it can be shown that law enforcement failed to exercise reasonable care in investigating and prosecuting the case, e.g., ignoring alternative suspects, coercing confessions, this could constitute a breach of duty. Post-conviction harm. The government's refusal to compensate or provide adequate support after exoneration could be framed as a failure to mitigate foreseeable harm resulting from their earlier actions. E3. Challenges in establishing duty of care. Policy. Operational acts. Australian courts often distinguish between policy decisions, e.g. resource allocation, and operational acts, e.g. specific actions by police. Only operational acts are typically subject to duty of care claims. For instance, coercing a confession could be seen as an operational failure, while not compensating wrongful convictions might be argued as a policy issue. Immunity protections. Police and government actors often have statutory immunity, shielding them from civil claims unless gross negligence or bad faith is proven. HEOR. Precedent supporting duty of care. In some cases, courts have recognized that public authorities owe a duty of care. For example, in cases where police fail to act on known threats to individuals, courts have found liability. AI could analyze similar precedents to identify where law enforcement or government actors were held accountable for negligence or misconduct. Conclusion. The government and law enforcement could be bound by a duty of care if it's shown that their actions or inactions caused foreseeable harm. In John's case, this might involve 1. Demonstrating investigative failures, e.g. focusing on John despite evidence pointing to Eric Cook. 2. Arguing that the government's failure to compensate compounds the harm caused by the wrongful conviction. Would you like me to delve deeper into any part of this? Or perhaps look into specific Australian precedents where duty of care claims succeeded against public authorities?
Well, perhaps, Leah, we may need to leave that for another day. But wow, I mean, that's covered everything, really. It's been well, not everything, just amazing the depth of that. John?
Well, what it appears to me is that citizens of WA in particular have been chained into the state. We've never realised that these opportunities are available to us. We've never been told that outside of what the government tells us.
Yep.
There's a bigger world.
There's a much bigger world out there. Absolutely.
We've never known this.
It's so true. And thank goodness for the internet when it comes to that. Let's face it, we've got access to all this information that was kept from us for such a long time.
You got this at your fingertips virtually
Really do.
now, you know,
Yeah.
and
This is brilliant technology.
to help moving forward with a lot of things. You know, geez, where do you start?
Where do you start? I just want to thank Adrian for this hard work, mate. This is brilliant, mate. This is
Wow,
such a
Fantastic.
game changer. It really is. And I
Fantastic.
can't wait to fight, and we'll have to fight to actually get it implemented once the software's done, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who might have some sticky fingers and they might be a little bit resistant to it. That's, you know, and that
So
is the reality.
We need to fight.
Damn straight, right? Just slightly iconic there. I'm going to have to wrap this show up. I'm going to wrap the show up because, quite frankly, Dom is dancing. I think that's the reason.
The Trump dance.
Very much so. I would like to thank you all for being here again, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Isla, thank you very much for sitting there so sweetly. I know I know you can't hear us, but it's lovely having you here and being part of Edge Radio Australia. So thank you for that. This has been Community Focus here on Edge Radio Australia.